Now, actually. I seem to have lost a few cabinet members on the journey down here. Yeah. Well, I know Nicola's on her way, so in a bit, who are we missing? Ali. Okay. Well, let's get started anyway. So, thank you all for being here again, cabinet members, councillors, members of the public. As usual, the agenda papers and the public forum submissions are available on our website. I need to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedures, which are outlined on the agenda and are currently being displayed on the screen, or they will currently being displayed on the screen. Yeah, there we go. The meeting is being webcast, so can I remind everyone to speak into the microphone and speak to make sure that you're clearly heard by the people watching at home now or on playback later. Agenda item 2 is public forum. This is a reminder that, as usual, statements and questions will be taken at the time the relevant agenda item is being discussed, and I'll reply or I'll ask the relevant cabinet member to reply to your question. Agenda item 3, apologies for absence. We've had apologies from Councillor Asher Craig, who's been speaking at the UN, which is fantastic for us. So I'm going to present Asher's paper today. She's actually speaking at the UN Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent. You know, a group had come to Bristol a few months ago. We were one of the cities they wanted to talk to. Some of you may have read about that, actually. They come up with quite a challenging report for our national government, but again, people in Bristol were some of the people that contributed to that report. So that is a follow-up to that. So really good for Bristol and important for the work that's being done, not just in Bristol and across the UK, but around the world for ongoing racial inequalities in our political economic system. Agenda item 4, and Nicola will be arriving, but she'll be a bit late today. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask any declarations of interest from any cabinet members for today's agenda? No? Okay. Great. So on to agenda item 7, Chair's business. Just to say a number of items here. First, the Finance P12 Provisional Outturn report has not been published in time for today's meeting, so I'll convene a separate cabinet, special cabinet on Monday the 15th of May at 11 a.m. And this will ensure the cabinet decision has been reached ahead of audit committee listed for the 30th of May. This date will be circulated by Democratic Services as per the proper process, with papers published 5 clear days ahead of the meeting. And just to say, the relevant chairs of scrutiny have been notified ahead of time. Second item, for those of you what to give, a week ago Sunday, I completed the London Marathon for Southmead Hospital Trust. I say that now so flippantly, I didn't feel like that at mile 16. But you can still donate if you'd like to. It goes to Southmead Hospital Trust charity, and to get the details, the link to be able to donate to that, just visit the Mayor's blog, and all the information is on there. And this is a word of encouragement, really. So I'll also be doing the Great Bristol Run, the 10K, on the 14th of May. Now, for the last few years, I've run as a VI guide, a guide runner for people who are visually impaired, and it's actually. When I was going out training, just in that very first year, I learned just how important it is. We've got people who end up socially isolated, inactive, if they lose their sight totally or largely. And the VI runners, guide runners, are really can help people get back into sports and physical activity. And some incredible stories of people who've turned from situations of really poor health and inactivity to situations of great health and activity. So Marley Bennett is going to run it as well. But for those of you that are interested in being guide runners in the future, please put yourself forward. There'll be many races to come. You get training, including actually, which is quite an experience, putting a blindfold on and being guided yourself around the downs. So you get to experience what you have to do, the way you have to constantly talk, undulating ground, incline, decline, turning left, turning right, how many seconds. So you get good training, and it is one of the best ways of running the 10K, I experienced actually, because you got a partner on the way. So it's, yeah, really encourage people to put themselves forward. Again, if you want to know more about that, contact my office. And also, I posted yesterday about the situation in Sudan. And there's a couple of things I just love people, really welcome people bearing in mind. First off, we've said many times before, Bristol, like all cities, is an international city. And what that means is that unlike some perspectives on Bristol, what happens overseas are not just distant foreign issues for a lot of people that live here. They are orders of immediate concern that involve brothers, sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles, parents. And what's going on in Sudan is of that order. It is of immediate concern right now to Bristolians of Sudanese heritage, our neighbours, our colleagues, our friends in Bristol. So one is just to put on record that we recognise that, and we don't just see it as an overseas issue distant for those people over there that remain nameless. They are real people. They are the families of our fellow Bristolians. But secondly, we are going to be talking with our own team here and working through the Local Government Association, Core Cities, and the Mayor's Migration Council that I currently sit on, to really make sure that our national government in particular, and national governments around the world, are aware of the critical role the world cities must play in addressing the global migration crisis, which is growing around us, whether it be migration driven by the kind of traditional conflict, famine, but increasingly climate-driven migration, of which we anticipate around 150 million, potential 150 million climate-driven migrants by the middle of this century. And I just want to point out, when I talk about climate-driven migrants in that order, I don't talk about it as a threat to the British way of life, as my own national government seems to want to frame it. I talk about it in terms of an international tragedy and a great injustice, one that the world must respond to, not just try to lock people out of. But in order for the cities around the world to be part of the solution, adequate levels of investment have to go into those cities. And that's not just investment in services, as important as that is. That's in investing in the city's infrastructure, the homes, the transport infrastructure, so that they are able to take more, to sustain more human life more efficiently. I've spoke about this in the TED talk I gave when I was in Vancouver last year, but we are talking about it with networks such as the 3CI and the Global Task Force on Climate-Driven Migration, the Mayor's Global Task Force on Climate-Driven Migration, C40, Global Parliament at Mayor's Migration Council. And so it's just a heads up, really. We have this issue that is immediate and local, but we as a city are want to make sure that we understand this as a global challenge that is something for the global network of cities to be tackling. But it requires the level of investment needed to equip us fully to be able to take that challenge on. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 8 now. Highways maintenance works, additional pothole funding. Don.
Thank you. This paper is good news. We have secured nearly £1 million of excuse me, extra funding from WECA towards the maintenance of our highways. Our priority is always the cyclical preventative work, such as surface dressing and micro asphalt. But due to the consistently low levels of funding over the past 10 years, we do still get potholes now as a result of the aging of the roads, the lack of preventative treatment, and also a particularly long, cold and wet winter. Although the trajectory of our The result of our work is that potholes have decreased by 60% since 2016. This extra money is going to be used on areas that we have identified, part of junctions and where you're going into roundabouts where they get particular stress from trucks and stuff like that. And what we're going to do is plane it down and resurface it with this money on top of the original money that we had for potholes and the preventative treatment that I have spoken about. We really do need a lot more money in order to maintain our roads to a much better standard. Also, consistent investment in our roads, if government was to allow us that, would enable us to spend less on these kind of fixing of potholes, which nobody wants, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. And let's move on now. We've had 2 public forum statements. We've had no questions. So the first statement is from Dave Redwell, Bristol Disabilities Equalities Forum and South Gloucestershire Equalities Network. Dave, I'm going to give you a minute for your statement.
It's
all right.
Gordon Richardson, really, but the issue we're picking up on is many of the crossing points, and an example of this is Victoria Street, down by your own council headquarters. There, you cross over on the crossing there, and there's a really great pothole right by the actual crossing across the road, the main pedestrian crossing. So all we're asking probably is Don, working with WECA, to make sure that where disabled people, all sorts of people are crossing the main highways, that where there are potholes on the crossings, and you made a good point about the roundabouts and approaches, that we make sure the crossings across those schemes are actually, the potholes are filled in and made safe for people to actually cross the road, as much as car users try, and that applies to cyclists as well. So just a bit of equality, a bit of diversity, make sure they're safe for pedestrians, because those are on the crossing points as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave. As usual, point well made. Next statement is from Councillor Martin Fodor. Martin, you've got your minute from now.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Yes, it's a relief we've got a share of this fund. The funds, I mean, vulnerable road users, they're suffering because of the vast number of potholes in the city. I think the most frustrating thing is the fact that we don't know when they'll get fixed, and an awful lot aren't being fixed because only the largest have been prioritised. And also, we won't know, unless you can please let us know, Don, where these improvements will be made. The frustration is not knowing when the resurfacing will occur that's meant to be preventive, and the fact that so many reported potholes don't get fixed because they're not deemed large enough. But there's still a threat to road safety. There's still a threat to small-wheeled users, cyclists, e-scooters, and we need to prevent those road safety problems. So I'm delighted we got the money. It's a relief, but please let us know where the programmes will happen and what people can report that will get fixed. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, so there weren't questions. There were 2 statements, but can I offer this to any cabinet members? Tom?
Really welcome this paper. I've had a recent incident of a pothole in my ward that's been repaired down by the hospital, which I think's gone down really well with residents. We know how important an issue this can be, particularly next to kind of vital health infrastructure in the city. So good to see it, and just need more of it, don't we?
Any others? No, can I just say something, Don? So one is, when we got the money through, I was very happy not to put too fine a point on it. Unfortunately, in a world of finite resources, where you have to actually pass a budget of financial finite resources, you do have to prioritise. This is the wicked challenge facing local government. We face prioritisation between crises, but also between early intervention and crises. What do we spend our limited finances on? And unfortunately, in a world where you have to actually have a budget, these are really realities we face. I had a briefing as well, Don, by the way, on this, and it was because obviously we wanted to get to the bottom of what's going on. and it's a really useful kind of framework from the team, who I think were excellent, by the way, working in really challenging circumstances. One is the city's infrastructure, as we said a number of times, is looking like it's at end of life. Some of our bridges, obviously Chocolate Path, St Philip's Causeway, Jail Ferry Bridge, you know, our roads. There's a lot of stuff that seems to be just coming to that, you know, that point at the same time, which is a challenge for us. As you said, increasingly extreme weather and increased usage, actually. Population growing, travel to work area. Bristol's 500,000 people during the day. At night, 1 million people over the day when all the commuters coming in and out. But do they maintain? Do they do a permanent resurface? Do they do the preventative work? Do they put a temporary fix in, or do they put a permanent fix in? All of that is competing for that finite resource. But we're looking forward to saying more about this over the coming weeks, aren't we? So, yeah. But Don, let me hand this back to you now to take the decision which I support, which will be displayed on the screen, and any final comments you had.
Yeah, and the good news is that we have got some really excellent engineers. I mean, having worked 2 years in this portfolio now, I become more and more impressed with them as I learn more about their job and begin to understand more about their job. And we do encourage citizens to report things on the website. It's taken very seriously, all the things that are put on there. Councillor Fodor, I wouldn't really want our officers to spend more time writing to you with their programmes. I'd rather they were about their work, to be honest. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Don. And onwards and upwards to getting some more money to do more work too. That's what we need. Okay, agenda item 9 is still with you, Don. The bus deal, strategic corridors update. There we are, I'm sorry. It takes forward a number of proposals to improve public transport use through bus prioritisation measures, as well as enhancing walking and active travel. It is a major investment in the city's main strategic corridors. These routes are being designed to provide a high degree of segregation, either on dedicated infrastructure or running freely with traffic. And we want to improve the infrastructure so that our bus services are more reliable, faster, cheaper, more attractive for operators under the current governance system, which requires that. This paper includes changes brought about as a result of the public consultation, which we do listen to, and we have listened to. And we will now progress to a full business case, and there will be a further opportunity for consultation prior to implementation. Thank you. Oh, here we go. We're back in action. So we've had 19 public forum statements on this item. I've no idea who is and isn't here, so I'm just going to go through the names. Michelle and Wayne Haskins, Jerry Richards, Beverly and Ian Dyer, Ian Scouse, Christine Gregory, Philip Gregory, Louise Hutchinson, no, Natalie Vowles, Lindsay Hamlin, Bernard Hole, David Mullaney. I see you, David. Yeah. Get a minute to your statement, David.
Okay, Neil. Generally, it's great that you are sorting out the problems around Henbury with parking, but there is problems around the back of where I volunteered at the community centre. Problem of excess parking in Matron Road, and the vehicles block entrance towards the back of the library and the community centre, which is used 24/7. I would like to ask if we could extend the yellow lines could be extended to Matron Road from Crow Lane, going back past the library and back through the community centre. That's basically my main gripe. The only thing I want to add is for 24-hour bus lanes, I don't agree with really. It only should be part-time, because I think because obviously there's only one bus that goes past Henbury 24 hours a day. So that is basically, that's what I've added to my statement. Okay.
Thanks, David. I look forward to working with you on those.
Thanks, David. Jennifer Belston, Laura Stokes, Kim Lewis, Alan Ham. I'd say Catch the Bus campaign. No, I don't. I mean, I don't see many other people in there. If you have made a statement on this and your name's not been read, could you indicate? No. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just record those statements, in the records, and obviously Don, you'll take them into account. We've had a number of questions. Again, one question. Okay. Dave, you had a question. Let me just get through to you and then this. Oh, for this. So let me go back to statements. Councillor Morris, you've got a statement in there. Didn't see you. So, sorry, you were at the end of my day. I got you and Ed Plowden, but just yourself is here. And Jonathan Hucker. Sorry, my apologies for that. Do you want to take your minute?
Does that include trying to get a microphone to work? Okay, fantastic. So we welcome the investment into Stockwood. We think that there's a risk of increasing the rat runs with some of the suggestions, and actually Hengrove and Stockwood needs to be considered as a whole when we consider that. I have concerns about the movement of the bus stop on the corner of Hitherbath Bridge. You are taking away the public transport access from the Imperial Sports Ground, which has up to 4,000 people a week using the site. We have concern refloating bus stops, and there's a question on that. I'll say we welcome the investment. We really are pleased to ask the officers to work with us to find the solution that will be beneficial to most. The proposals, if they were to proceed, will lead to a massive increase in displaced traffic. And we need to discuss double yellow lines. And I think the volume of statements and questions asked is just an idea of how concerned people are in the area.
Okay, thank you for that, Graham and Jonathan. Appreciated. I don't see any other statements there for that item. So let's go on to questions then. If I go through in order, Katie Bennett, no. Peter Liddington. Laura Stokes. I tell you what, I've got so many names I don't recognize. If you have a question, could you put your hand up? Is that Dave? Just you, Dave. Okay, let's come. Sorry? And Graham. Okay. Dave, let's go to your question. Oh, you did have a statement? My apologies. Let's do your statement, or do you want to merge them? Statement into question.
So we support the principles of the only issue we're concerned about from a quality point of view, we did a lot of work with this council, South and Baines, with officers, we're grateful for them, and the Wecker Bill Rights. And then it doesn't appear our comments appeared in the paperwork of the report written by the officers, which is disappointing. That's also the Older People's Forum, Black South West, all the hard to reach groups were invited to an evening seminar, which we spent a lot of time in. We just want to make sure those comments don't get missed, because some of the comments were about disabled people having access to the bus stop. What the Graham made about Imperial Park, we went through every stop to make sure we had drop curves, traffic curves, proper access across the roads, and we just want to make sure all that work is not lost, because that's very important. If it's a disabled person, a blind person, hard to reach person, that work is not simply lost. It's somewhere in the Wecker, somewhere in Wecker, or somewhere in Bristol. We just make sure it's
yeah. Well, Don's got your warning on that now, so we'll make sure. Did you want to go straight to your question then, Dave?
My question really is about corridors. This is my first question. It's really about the main, because there's
more than this, just can't spot this, but there's more in the corridor in the question. So our question is, how is that going to progress? These are cross-border corridors, which you've got good, but there are issues around resources, officers, and make sure WECA has the appropriate officers to do the job. And that's what's worrying us at the moment.
All right.
Because one of the schemes that Don mentioned, Bath Road, is actually WECA. Their project to support it, but we need officers. Down is very, very short bunch of officers to do this work in these offices. Trust me, I've been in the office. We need Bristol officers over there with the other three councils to get this work moving.
Should we give Don the list?
My question is, how are we going to move the resources over to make sure that we can carry out these schemes on the ground?
Don?
across the city region?
You were talking there about WECA responsibilities, weren't you? Yes, as I say, but I'm not really going to comment on how WECA will resource itself. And just to say, the officers I work with at Bristol City Council, I'm very pleased to have them here. And I will allow WECA to make its own decisions on how it resources itself. But I would like it to move forward with a viable consultation on the Bath Road this summer.
Did you have a supplementary, Dave?
I suppose the supplementary is simply without joining out the officers who are feeling the authorities are very different these schemes, but the authority lawyers and things like that, so officers need to move on this.
Thanks, Dave. You had a second question as well?
If you could put it up just so I can see it.
With the cuts in bus service funding from local government and through the transport levy, but more important, government funding through COVID-19?
The issue really is bringing it up to date since the report just 2 years ago. That's with the corridors which would be commercially viable. These corridors now are funded by £11 million grant from the Metro here down Norris to North Somerset. These funding services centre to set them. I suppose our comments here are we need to force this further, so these services don't finish 7 to 7, but they actually run evenings and Sundays, because these corridors drop off the edge, literally, at 8 o'clock at night when they go to be hourly or not run at all. So that's my question, and then what we're going to do, and I suppose the other point is, the planning work went on with the secondary bus network. We're now talking about Wesley, one of the Britain's and South Band. We need to make sure that they're included in the future changes to the project. So is this work being upgraded because the original bus improvement plan was in the days of commercial viable bus companies? And
Should we-
lots of resources which we don't have today.
Let's let Don answer that one.
Well, you'll know that improving the infrastructure always makes a bus service more commercially viable. So that's what we are doing here. As regards interchanges, that's Future Transport Zone. They're working on those, and I think that that work is going well. I think that's all I've got to say on it. But
My supplementary would simply be, is the scheme being worked in such a way to make sure that we can interchange with Westling, because Westling, the buses don't necessarily go down on the front onto the platform, but they actually go onto the drop lift at the back, towers go down wheelchairs at the back. So I want to make sure that these interchanges, when a Westling picks up in the Stockwood area, the Brislington area, that we can access from the mainline bus to the Westling bus. I think that's critical. That's difficult at the moment. That was something. It's Westling being carried on in the scheme.
I mean, I think we've still got to take this to full business case, and also the work on the interchanges, hubs, however you want to call them, is still ongoing with Future Transport Zone. So it's a good point. It's a good point, and I'll have it in my mind. Thanks.
Thanks, Don. Councillor Morris, you have the next question.
I recall at the last full council meeting, there was some concern raised about Park Row, I think, and you had, I believe, delayed implementation of a floating bus stop because you had concerns about it. And I just wanted to know, is there a strategy in this city regarding floating bus stops?
Well, it's on a case-by-case basis. We recognise that there are disadvantages with floating bus stops, but also there may be instances where having a floating bus stop generates other really positive outcomes, and so it might be the best solution. It's all a question of balance. It was judged that on Park Row it wasn't, because the number of bus services were actually very low. But there are other places where you've got an awful lot of bus services, and it enables you to do a number of things.
Do you have a supplementary, Graham?
Only just, do you have any evidence to support or any examples of where floating bus stops have worked? I'd be interested to investigate.
Well, it's primarily for our funder, Active Travel England, to justify that, because they have the strong emphasis on this, and it's something that we are pushing back on where we feel it's appropriate, but we are funded by Active Travel England, and they have their guidance.
Yeah, we pushed back quite hard on the last one just because we want to be sure, and we're very aware of, while we get some very energetic communications coming in support, as Don said, we're aware that, you know, everything comes with a price, right? And it can have implications for older people, disabled people, families, two things to cross rather than just one thing to cross to get to a bus. So, as you know, as Don said, we'll look at each case as it comes. I wouldn't say we have a hard-bound strategy sitting on a shelf anywhere. We're just looking at how we make the best of our, you know, our public transport offering and our existing infrastructure in a old city with narrow roads on occasion. But did you have you had a second question, Graham?
Yes, and it relates back to the removal of the Hitherbath Bridge bus stop. The reason it's being removed is to enable a cycle lane to go through it. And I'm just wanting to understand, again, through the strategic corridors work, what takes priority, bus users or cyclists, which is particularly relevant in Stockwood wards, where it has the second highest proportion of people aged over 70 in the city, and the second highest proportion of people who live day to day with their lives greatly impacted by illnesses and chronic conditions.
Because a lot of people over 70 do cycle, for one thing. But I think the way you're framing the balancing act that we have to do is attempting to fuel division, really. I think what most people want is the best possible solution for everybody, so the best possible bus services and the best possible cycle infrastructure.
Supplementary, Graham?
Yeah, so I take umbrage at the comment. I'm not trying to fuel fire. I'm just trying to greatly understand what's going on. Because, yes, a lot of people over 70 do cycle, but a lot don't. And those with chronic health conditions probably don't either. No, I think for now I'll leave it there before I say something I might regret. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Graham. Councillor Hucker, you have a question as well?
Yes, thank you, Marvin. I've got two questions, actually. The first one centres on the proposed remodelling of the junction of Wells Road and West Town Lane. This included banning the right turn from West Town Lane, the right turn into West Town Lane from Wells Road, and the left turn into Wells Road from West Town Lane. There was significant opposition to this, as evidenced by the results of the consultation. 78% disagreed, 66% strongly disagreed. Can the Cabinet Member for Transport please confirm whether the proposal to ban these turns has been removed from the plans?
So the proposed ban left turn from West Town Lane into Wells Road has been dropped, but we will be taking forward to the next stage the banned right turn from Wells Road into West Town Lane. But we obviously working towards the full business case, so we will carry on having those discussions with yourselves and residents.
Okay, thank you. I suppose supplementary to that is there the opportunity to also reconsider that particular plan? Because I think that with the consultation that we carried out ourselves, it indicated that the banning of both turns was very unpopular.
We will continue to discuss that, but I think you need to keep at the forefront of your mind the reason why we're doing this, which is that we need better bus infrastructure in order to have better bus services. Our bus services have really suffered under the Conservative government all around the country, not just in Bristol, and we are now trying to do our utmost here to improve them in Bristol for some of those elderly and disabled people you've spoken of. And I would appreciate your cooperation with that, and maybe even a little humility regarding the origin of some of these problems, which is your own party.
Okay, so should we go to the supplementary there? Let's go to your second question, Councillor Hucker.
Okay, thank you, Marvin. Yeah, the original proposals indicated that there would be there would be 24-hour bus lanes along the A37 Wells Road from the West Town Lane junction all the way back to Whitchurch Village. I understand that these will now be, or the proposal's been revised to make these now 12-hour bus lanes rather than 24-hour. But I couldn't see anything in the paper that indicated whether these bus lanes would still be going as far south as Whitchurch Village, or if they would terminate before that point.
Well, we are now proposing that those bus lanes will be 12 hours. But if I could make the point again, the better the infrastructure we have, including the number of hours in which those bus lanes are open, the better bus service we are likely to have. Because under the commercial model or the deregulated model of bus services, which has been advocated by your party for many, many years, we need to make this infrastructure and these opportunities attractive to operators in order that they will come and give us their service as cheaply and as regularly as possible. So I would encourage you to approach this positively and in that light.
We're approaching it in a positive frame of mind.
Do I have to do your supplementary?
Yes, well, in fact, the supplementary is the same as the original, really. Is it envisaged that the bus lanes will go as far south as Whitchurch Village?
We're happy to discuss that as we move towards the business case, which will come for consultation and hopefully to Cabinet in December. And then we hope that next year we can begin the implementation. And we hope that next year also we will be given new opportunities by the incoming government to reform all bus services and the governance of them. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. We had one other question from David Wilcox, but I don't see him in here. So that's the end of public forum. Can I ask any Cabinet members if they had any comments to make on this item? Kai.
That works, yeah. Yeah, just to support this paper really, and as has been previously said, a lot of these choices about infrastructure, what gets priority is a trade-off, isn't it? And we have to balance up, you know, the positives and the negatives. But the A37 and the A4108 have got some of the worst performing bus services on them. So if we were going to pick any corridor in the city where we were to target this intervention, it would be this corridor. And services like the number 2 bus service, you know, the record of them is, in terms of punctuality and stuff like that, is really, really poor. And they're cross-city bus services, so they serve many communities, including Stockwood, but they go all the way up to Southmead and beyond. So really welcome this investment. As I said, it's not, you know, it's a balance as well, you know, and a trade-off. So you're not always going to make everybody happy, but we have to invest in improving bus infrastructure.
Thank you, Kai. Any other cabinet? I mean, I'll just add to your comments on that. I mean, it is the case that local government operates within a context. It operates within a financial context that is not of its own setting, unfortunately, which is one of the arguments we constantly have through the LGA, through core cities to government, to have more predictable and adequate levels of funding that's not based on Hunger Games. And it operates within a legislative framework, one that has minimised the amount of control and influence we do have over our buses and leaves us having to negotiate with private companies. Now, you know, we have, I would say that in James Freeman and Doug Clarenbold, we have had 2 local managing directors of First, and there are obviously other companies, but who we've been able to build a good relationship with, and I do think champion for the city, but they themselves are within structures that have requirements on them that aren't always in line with the city's interests. The market is not always in line with Bristol's public interest, and until we do get changes to that financial and that legislative framework, then we'll be very limited, you know, in our ability to deliver the transport offering we would like to make for Bristol, and that's unfortunate. So it is important, and I have shared a number of times, that we do what we can with what we've got in the face of the challenges we face with the resources we have, but we all in this chamber need to be on the front foot of challenging the national framework within which we have to work, that too often limits the opportunities. And what did Stephen Luke say, right? The definition of alternatives is the ultimate power. And unfortunately, we are in a world in which it looks like we've got options, but they're all predefined for us in many ways, but they do not solve our challenge. So it is a wicked challenge. And as you said, Kai, everything we do has a price. And again, this is one of the kind of the maturities we've wanted to bring to so much of the Bristol debate, whether it would be about land use and house building, height, density, greenfield land, and public transport. Every solution we bring forward to unlock a benefit itself will come with a price somewhere. Our job is to work out whether the price is worthy of the, of the prize, and then to minimise that price or eliminate it as much as we can. But this is never easy, and it's easy for that to turn into bun fights and cheap headlines and all the rest of it, the stuff that undermines people's ability to get engaged with the real challenges facing Bristol's debate, Bristol's future. But let me hand back to you now, Don, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thank you. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Don. So let's go on to agenda item 10, and this is for me, and it's the Temple Quarter update. And we'll say what's been described as one of the gateways to one of the most exciting regeneration opportunities in Europe right now. So I'm really pleased to be able to bring another update to Cabinet on this project. And Temple Quarter Strategic Board that I chair we meet since 2017, has signed the formal funding agreements to accept the £95 million investment in Temple Quarter last month. The signing of these agreements reflects our partners and the many organisations we brought around the table ongoing commitment to working collaboratively. And the investment will mean 3 new entrances to the station, a major improvement in the accessibility of Temple Meads from right across the city, and new mixed-use housing and commercial spaces at Mead Street and Temple Gate. And working in partnership alongside the University of Bristol, we are going to be able to transform 130 hectares of brownfield land to bring 10,000 new homes, 22,000 jobs and opportunities to Bristol and the region. I'm sad Martin left because I heard his co-leader talk about the importance of building on brownfield sites on the Today programme yesterday. So I'm sure they're very supportive of what we're doing here. To support this, we set out the framework principles for the area. The framework sets out the scale and ambition our partners have for change across the area, stretching from Temple Gate to St Philip's Causeway. And this development framework is broken down into 6 key character areas, setting out the opportunities each area presents to transform the area into a world-class gateway to the city region, something so many people in Bristol have long lamented the city hasn't had in its train station. So this public consultation showed there was very strong support for our proposals. 87% of respondents agreed with the guiding principles for change. And we said that's so important because we want this scheme to be something that is generally of Bristol and by Bristol. It's a huge regeneration opportunity, but we want it to be an expression of our city and its heritage. So reflecting the project's potential to transform a large area of the city and the anticipated benefits it will bring to the city region, the Temple Court partners are eager to gather as much public feedback as possible, and we will continue to work with local businesses and neighbouring communities. Many respondents also supported ideas in the framework around delivering housing, jobs, improved accessibility, sustainable travel, community infrastructure and public green spaces, and we're committed to taking these comments forward. And in fact, at the meeting on Friday, at the last meeting we had, we talked about the importance of this scheme delivering the Global Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 SDGs, not having them simply there as something we measure ourselves against, but having something that this scheme proactively delivers as a national and an international model in how you do regeneration that is inclusive and sustainable and supports net gain in biodiversity. I want to mention to Cabinet as well some other exciting updates on progress in the area, as work on the University of Bristol campus started in April, with both the entrance and the campus expected to open in autumn 2026. L&G are now engaging the public on their emerging proposals for Temple Island. Another exciting news has now becoming real at the Fruit Market, where thousands of new homes will be delivered in a mixed-use site, including a market and a potential home for Bristol Rovers Football Club. And my office has been working very closely with both the developer and the club on these developing proposals. So lots of activity being driven in the city right now. So let's go on to public forum statements and questions. We've received 2 public forum statements. The first statement is from Rail Future 7 side. Is that you, David? You got about 5 hats on today, right? Yeah, that's that's a way of getting more statements on the agenda, right? So let's give you a minute. Okay.
We can't afford to lose the...
Just 10 seconds, Dave.
Yeah, rail infrastructure around St Philip's Marsh and the employment, so it's very important that that is protected, because that's working class jobs for people locally in the Brislington and that area around there.
Okay.
So those are the points, but jobs for local people and make sure working class people live around there are part of the scheme. Thank you.
Can I just get clarity? What was the last item you mentioned in your speech there? The last component part for this?
The last point is we've got lots of working class communities in Boston.
No, after that one. Oh, there you go. Let's start with that one. Okay. Okay, no, I'm happy with that. Okay, thank you, Dave. So we had another statement from David Wilcox, who's not with us. So that's the end of public forum. Well, David had a question, but he's not here. That's the end of public forum. Any cabinet members like to comment on this item? Nicola.
I feel cheeky commenting when I've literally just walked in the room. Well, yeah, it's just fantastic news. I think, Dave, we spoke obviously in that forum recently. Everything you're saying is absolutely correct. We need all those things. But after, I don't know, Marvin, was it 2017 or something, when we first started talking about Temple Quarters in the station and everything that comes with it, it's massive news for the city. And I think it is possible to get a heritage building, a heritage asset, into a state fit for a 2023 city. But it does take this kind of work. And so, yeah, it's good news. And I'm really glad, I'm glad it's here again today.
Thanks, Nicola. Anyone else? I mean, Tom, you are going to get your houses. Kai, you're going to get your ecological advantages, heat networks. We need to get the flood defence in. Dave, your point on inclusion, by the way, this is something Helen's talked about as well. It's to build a space, intergenerational housing, adaptable housing, mixed communities, and good public spacing for people to be able to move around. Nicola's done loads of work, by the way, also with Carly Heath on making those safe places for a 24-hour economy. And that doesn't just mean people who work in bars and clubs, it means people who work through the night as well, be they cleaning hospital staff and making sure they're safe. And Don will get his transport routes. And we want to build for health as well. The idea is, how do you build places that actually generate health, rather than build places that people live in and may get sick, and then we pick up the tab in our acute services over the years ahead. So we see this as an incredible opportunity, and that means the pressure is high. We have to get it right. And I think you probably would have liked the conversation we did have at the last Temple Quarter Board, when we pressed the point about inclusion, sustainability, and the SDGs, and everyone around that table jumped on and said yes. And not least, if I can just steal the mic, we also talked about the importance of the local supply chain. So how do we get local businesses queued up to be able to get on the contracts when those billions of pounds are spent? So we want to talk to the Federation of Small Business, Chamber of Commerce, and do some of that preparatory work. And some of that won't be necessarily about skills, although some of it will be skills for workers. Some of it will be about enabling small businesses to come together with other small businesses to create medium-sized and larger businesses so they can bid for the bigger contracts. These are all things that we're incredibly keen to now to work on and explore. And I will say, Richard Ennis, the chief exec of WECA, was very positive in that meeting as well, having the skills budget, and said, look, I've got a considerable skills budget. We can get this lined up to this scheme. So I think you would have been encouraged by that meeting. Okay, so thank you, everyone, for your comments on that. I'll now take the decision, which will be displayed on the screen. So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Let's go on to agenda item 11 now, Adult Social Care Review of East Bristol Intermediate Care. Helen?
Thanks, Marvin. And I don't need to remind colleagues about the huge and growing pressures that adult social care budgets, not just here, but everywhere, are under, with the additional demands, the costs of providing care, and workforce issues are on the news virtually every day, aren't they? So this report is a consequence of the budget report back in February, when one of the proposals around us making savings in the adult social care budget was to look at, with an option of closure of the East Bristol Intermediate Care Centre. So those discussions with potential other providers have happened, and they haven't taken that opportunity. So we are now in the position where we need to close the centre. Bristol, you might remember when we took the report about South Bristol, is very unusual in still providing in-house rehab services. So we're one of very, very few councils that still does that. And it just isn't economic for us to carry on doing it. And also it clashes or contradicts the aim of the integrated care service, which is for everybody to have the same sort of standard of care on leaving hospital. And the aim much more these days is to get people back home, to deliver rehab services in their homes for them, so 6 weeks of care. But obviously some people do need bedded care when they first leave hospital. So Sirona, as I say, haven't expressed an interest in running this service. It is different from the South Bristol situation, though. The cohort of workers at East Bristol is very different to what it was in South Bristol. And it's also different because of how we've approached it. And the HR committee asked for a lessons learned report to go to them after the closure of South Bristol, because you'll remember that there were some significant workforce issues that were raised at that time. And as part of the lessons learned, one of the things was that we would certainly brief ward members better than we'd done in the South Bristol situation. And we've had all of the St George ward members in to talk to them about this, but also to have a much better and hopefully compassionate relationship with people whose jobs are going to change. But as I say, the cohort of workers in East Bristol is very different from what it was in South Bristol. And I'm pleased to be able to report that the majority of people who've had that conversation with their managers there's going to be redeployment opportunities for them within Bristol. And Redfield Lodge, our care home that's run still by the City Council, and there isn't a proposal to not do that, is within reasonable distance for people who work at East Bristol Intermediate Care Centre, and hopefully many of them will be redeployed there. So it's it's unfortunate that because of the pressures on our budgets that we've got to take this decision, but as I've said, very few councils do this ourselves. We should thank those people who have worked in both of the two remaining centres up until more recently, because they have been providing a fantastic service and we do get very good feedback, but it's not either affordable or appropriate for us to continue to do so.
Yeah, thanks for your leadership on this, Helen. We've had no public forum statements and no questions. Any cabinet members? Nicola.
Just to put on my record, as a St George councillor, just my thanks to Helen and your officer team as well, because it's not easy at all to do what you've had to do, and I think you've handled it with a huge amount of respect for the centre, for the staff that work there, and for us as elected representatives. You know, I feel like I've been engaged throughout it and had the kind of space to think and then come back and ask questions, and rather than feeling like it's 1 minute to midnight and this is what we're doing. So I'm really grateful to you both, and quite it was a difficult decision to take. I think there is awareness of it in the community as well, and so I'm hopeful that in the responses I've been able to give to residents that have contacted me, that they understand the operating context and they understand why the decision's been taken. So I'll leave it there. Thanks, Marvin.
Thank you, Nicola. Well, Helen, let me hand it back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Great, thank you, Marvin. So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Helen. Agenda item 12, Household Support Fund, April 23, March 24. Craig, you're bringing this one?
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. This is a good newspaper, really. So further to the continuing cost of living crisis, Bristol's going to receive a further £8 million to support those most in need with the cost of food, energy and water bills and other essential household items for a period April 23 to March 24. This is an additional round of funding under the Household Funds Support Fund scheme, with the criteria being the same as before, but this time it's been announced for a full year rather than 6 months, which makes sort of planning ahead much easier. The full proposed spend is contained within Appendix A of the report, but the main points, so 3.4 million will be spent on providing free school meals to provide support over all school holidays in the next year. So that's great, a great win. 1.8 million to be given to various charities who will assist low-income households of all ages with food and fuel poverty. 100,000 to assist those pension-age council tax reduction households. 698,000 to top up the local crisis prevention fund. 500,000 to top up the discretionary housing payment fund. £440,000 to assist care leavers and foster families with food and heating costs, and then a remaining £837,000, which we will agree by October within those range of priorities, really. In addition, this paper seeks approval for the procurement of a contract to deliver a corporate-wide supermarket food voucher contract, which will support all of these objectives. So good news, £8 million going to the poorest people in the city and distributed in a way that I think aligns to our values.
Thanks, Craig. It is good news. We've had no public forum on this one, unfortunately. Any Cabinet members wish to comment? No, Ellie?
Just to quickly say, really welcome this. It's fantastic, and I know that a lot of our partners and a lot of our families who are struggling to make ends meet will really welcome this. It provides a lifeline for them. And it's fantastic to see the support that we've been continuing to give to kids in receipt of free school meals over the holidays as well, just to give them that support during that difficult time. And also welcome the further prioritisation of people with disabilities receiving support, as we know that they're often quite disproportionately affected by increased cost of living, etc. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellie, and thank you, Craig. And let me hand back to you now to take the decision, which I support, and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Yeah, and I'll just put on thanks for the team as well. You've worked tirelessly to come up with the policy around this. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Agenda item 13, which is Bristol City Council Data Centre Backup and Recovery Competitive Tender. Craig.
Doesn't sound anywhere near as good news as the previous one, but actually if we don't have a backup contract and everything goes wrong, then we'll know soon enough, and the most vulnerable in the city will actually be disproportionately affected by it. So this report seeks permission to procure and award a contract for IT disaster recovery and backup services and service management and protection, which help protect the council's data in case of failures in its data centres. It is vital the council has these services to safeguard our data in case of any failures in the local data centre or other incidents, including cyber attack, which could compromise our data and services. The council currently has an interim contract through till March 2024 to allow for a competitive tender to be run and a longer term contract to be awarded. The new contract will be more suited to the council's future technological state, taking into consideration the movement to much of that estate to the cloud.
Thank you, Craig. Any Cabinet members on this? I mean, we've mentioned it so many times, isn't it? This is part of that invisible work that happens, that doesn't get campaigned for. I mean, often people don't campaign for lawyers and planners, and yet they need the planning process to run, and they want us to enter into good negotiations to get our share of affordable homes and viability contests, and no one campaigns for IT experts, and yet they keep our data that we need safe and keep the council working. So this is stuff that people don't get thanks for, but is absolutely essential to smooth running, of the local authority. If things go wrong, then they know about it, but not ahead of time. So look, thank you, and I extend thanks to your team for their hard work on this. Let me hand back to you now to take the decision, which I support, and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thanks, Marvin. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Okay, agenda item 14, Provisional Finance Return Outturn Report 22-23.
Marvin, that's the report that's been pulled.
My apologies, I just read this. I was getting caught up with the agenda items there. So we're going to move on to the Provisional Finance Outturn Report because this was not published in time for today's meeting. So it's going to be subject of a separate Cabinet meeting, as I said at the beginning, on Monday the 15th of May, which this paper will be considered, date of which will be listed shortly. So let's move on to agenda item 15, the 2023-24 Corporate Business Plan.
Thanks, Marvin. The purpose of this paper is for Cabinet to note the Corporate Business Plan 23-24 and the associated performance framework. The plan sets out how the Council will make progress on its key commitments as set out in the corporate strategy in the next financial year and has been reviewed by the Cabinet, the Mayor's Office, Exec Directors and all Directors. The performance framework sets out the KPIs and demonstrates the impact on citizens. Together, the plan and framework contribute to individual objective setting for all members of staff and enable prioritisation of resources throughout the financial year. They set out the activities carried out by the Council to bring benefits to Bristol by improving services, infrastructure and communities for citizens across the city. I'm sure the Cabinet will have been through their areas in length, so I won't ramble on.
Thank you, Craig. So we've had no public forum or statements, no statements and no questions. Can I ask any Cabinet members if they wish to come in particularly on this item? No? Okay. Well, let me hand back to you, Craig, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decisions being made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you very much for that, Craig. So on to agenda item 16, the Children's Social Care and Special Education Spot Purchase Placements Update. And this is Asha's paper, but because she's not here, I'll bring this today. So this report seeks an update to update Cabinet on children's spot purchase placements in excess of £500,000 for the purposes of financial governance and to seek approval for spend to be monitored through the corporate parenting panel. The care population nationally is growing and we have increasing numbers of children with complex needs. Bristol City Council is working to build our placement sufficiency, but where there is not suitable care for a child available on existing frameworks, it's necessary to spot purchase placements. These independently provided residential and foster care placements are used to provide high quality care for our looked after children with complex needs. And this approach is in line with our corporate strategy to work towards a child-friendly city where children and young people are cared for and supported to overcome adverse childhood experiences. The cost of these placements has been jointly funded by social care, health and education, and not solely by the council. The placement team proactively review the provision and make changes to the support packages when appropriate. For the purposes of financial governance, currently this spend update reports to Cabinet on an annual basis. A more appropriate governance route would be through the multi-agency corporate parenting panel, which has representation from care experienced young people and key stakeholders such as health and education. So we've had no public forum statements or questions for this item. Any Cabinet members wish to comment here? No, okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to extend my thanks to Asha and the team for the work, on this area. And in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. The decision is now being displayed on the screen. Okay, so let's do agenda item 17, Corporate Risk Management Report, quarter 4, 22-23. Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. This is just a report for noting, and Cabinet will have been through the risks in their area, I'm sure. It's probably worth pointing out that the only two threat risks that we have as an organisation, with the top level scores of 28, are both financial, which won't come as a surprise to anyone. One is around the medium-term financial plan, and the other around in-year financial deficit, which everyone will know that we spend a huge amount of time focusing on, so won't come as a particular surprise. Beyond that, I just recommend it to Cabinet for noting, and please read it if you haven't.
Thanks, Craig. We've had no public forum statements and no questions. Now for it to any other Cabinet member. I know we grapple with this constantly. I'm going to hand back to you now, Craig, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you, everyone. That's the last item. Well, I do have to go back. There were a couple of items we missed at the beginning. First is agenda item 5, there is no consequence to this, but agenda item 5, matters referred for consideration by scrutiny or full council. There were none on this occasion. And agenda item 6, reports from scrutiny commissions. Again, there were none on this occasion. So that's the end of today's Cabinet meeting. Thanks everyone for attending. Date of the next Cabinet is Monday the 15th of May for the finance paper. The date of the June Cabinet meeting is, as usual, the first Tuesday of the month, being Tuesday the 6th of June 2023. Have a good week. Take care.